Welcome to our next speaker in the Fall 2022 speaker series that is part of James Madison University School of Professional and Continuing Education. We have a new program called the Leadership Education and Development Series, which provides a bunch of free content on how to become more expert leaders. This fall, we're focused on thriving in the new normal, what leaders should know to confidently lead innovation in hybrid and remote teams and organizations. So our speaker today is part of a series of over a dozen speakers on this theme. And if you go to the link and you subscribe by email, you'll be sure to get all of these speaker interviews right into your inbox. You also get an invite to a Facebook group. And we already have over 300 people registered for the event, and the Facebook group is over 100, and we just started promoting last week. We are sharing these interviews beginning October 3rd, but doing most of the interviews in September. So please join the conversation, and we're learning from each other as we go. Now, without further ado, today's topic is about brainstorming and how to do that effectively. Brainstorming sometimes gets a bad rap. People think it's not an effective tool. And I think we'll discover through this conversation that there are actually opportunities in our online and hybrid remote environment. The person that is going to lead this discussion for us is Dr. Tsipursky, and thank you for being here. Dr. Gleb, for short, is the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts. He helps tech and insurance executives drive collaboration, innovation, and retention in hybrid work. He serves as the CEO of the boutique future of work consultancy, Disaster Avoidance Experts, which helps organizations adopt a hybrid-first culture instead of incrementally improving on the traditional office-centric culture. He is a best-selling author of 7 books. Some of those books are Never Go With Your Gut, How Pioneering Leaders Make the Best Decisions and Avoid Business Disasters. He also wrote The Blind Spots Between Us, How to Overcome Unconscious Cognitive Bias and Build Better Relationships. And I am going to spoil the bonus here. You will have a chance to get a copy, if you stay through the end, of his latest book. The second edition just came out in June, Leading Hybrid and Remote Teams, a manual on benchmarking to the best practices for competitive advantage. He is also the author of a Harvard Business Review article titled, Why Virtual Brainstorming is Better for Innovation. Before we get into that, Dr. Gleb, is there anything else you'd like to say by way of introduction or about how people can connect with you on social media?
Well, thank you, Kai. I appreciate that. Thank you for that warm introduction. So yes, so what Kai was mentioning is that if you go to tinyurl.com/DAE event, so again, tinyurl.com/DAE event, you can get a copy of my book, Hybrid and Remote, Leading Hybrid and Remote Teams, as Kai mentioned. So that'll be a good introduction to my work on hybrid and remote teams. And presumably that's what you're interested in if you're checking out this speaker series, How to Innovate in Hybrid and Remote Settings. I've helped by now 21 companies transition to a hybrid and remote back to office environment, figuring out, or no, the remote not so back to office, but figuring out their permanent future of work arrangements. So I have a lot of experience and expertise working in this area. And I'll be happy to share and focus in my expertise that I published in my Harvard Business Review article on how to innovate specifically in hybrid and remote settings, focusing on brainstorming techniques.
And you're locating brainstorming as a step in a process or in a commitment to innovation on the part of a company or team.
That's right. So brainstorming is the process where you already decided what you want to innovate around. So you don't have kind of spontaneous ideas. You're not kind of in the, well, maybe we can work on this or that. Brainstorming is when you already have an idea that you want to work on, and that's when you're coming up with solutions. You're coming up with paths forward around that general broad topic.
We will have another interview in the series specifically around the role of product owner in the Scrum Agile project management process. And what I really like about that, it helps us locate where we want to ideate, where in the decision-making, in the iterative work, in the planning of work, do we want to apply brainstorming? So Dr. Gleb is going to get into a method for brainstorming and also some challenges in traditional brainstorming. But what I want to just highlight again is this point that we're just making, that before you apply brainstorming, be thoughtful about when you're doing it and about what you're doing it for. And is there anything else you'd like to say about that point, or maybe the misuse of brainstorming?
I think we'll get to it when I actually do my presentation and share about how brainstorming might go wrong.
Well, go for it.
Excellent. So let's talk about brainstorming, and specifically in hybrid and remote environments. Thinking about hybrid and remote environments, we have a problem that we really try to shoehorn traditional office-centric methodologies into hybrid and remote environments. And that's why people have trouble with innovating in hybrid and remote environments. And you see companies like Apple and Tesla and Google trying to get all their workers back into the office. Some of them, like Tesla, 5 days a week. Some of them, like Apple and Google, for most of the week, because they feel that, well, we really can't get innovation out of our team, and our companies are based on innovation. Well, the problem is that they're doing it wrong, and they're not taking advantage of this major opportunity to maximize innovation in hybrid and remote work. To do that, we really need to put aside our assumptions, habits, and preferences about what do we do and how we innovate in these settings, and focus really on those business objectives, on the outcomes we want to achieve through innovating, through problem solving, through creating, developing new ideas, rather than what's personally comfortable. Because often what's personally comfortable for us is being in the office, because that's what we know and that's what we feel is the right thing. And we need to overcome decision-making cognitive biases. So these are dangerous judgment errors we make because of how our minds are wired, and integrate best practices on how to innovate in these new work arrangements in hybrid and remote settings. Now, cognitive biases are specific mistakes. It's kind of my area of expertise. I've been doing work on this for already 22 years. Yeah, 22 years by now, since 1999, on how companies can address cognitive biases, these dangerous judgment errors, effectively. And one of the biggest problems I've found over this time, especially in the 2 years of the pandemic, is a cognitive bias called functional fixedness. Functional fixedness. You might have heard of the hammer-nail syndrome. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, that's what functional fixedness is about. When we learn one right way of functioning, like brainstorming, or more broadly, innovating, we tend to apply that to all sorts of problems and think that it fits all contexts, when it really doesn't. So we transpose office-based methods of brainstorming on hybrid and remote work, and then we wonder why we're failing to adapt strategically to innovative anywhere and collaborate everywhere. So let's talk about brainstorming. Traditional brainstorming is quite useful for innovation, but it has some serious problems. So traditional brainstorming, as I'm sure you know, is when a team gets together in a room and they have an idea about what they want to focus on, then they start generating ideas about how to solve the problem, how to develop a new direction, whatever they're focusing on in that setting. And some people are talking, some people are thinking. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and we see some benefits. One of the benefits for that setting is called social facilitation. Social facilitation, that's when you are in a team, in a room, and you feel enthusiastic and motivated to generate ideas because other people around you are generating ideas. That's one benefit of what the research shows traditional in-person brainstorming brings us. Another benefit is called synergy. So synergy is the fact that it's not kind of corporate speak here, it's an academic research terminology where, specific to brainstorming, where when someone has an idea and that person inspires you to have an idea that you wouldn't have had if they didn't share their idea first. So that's another benefit. So there are definitely some benefits to traditional brainstorming, but there are a lot of costs. One of them is called production blocking. Production blocking. That's when you have an idea, but other people are talking about their ideas and they're going off on a tangent about whatever they're talking about, and you are reluctant to interrupt. Now, you might not have been in that situation for a while at least, or ever. And that's because you might be in a leadership position. So we find that high status people in a team definitely tend to be much more likely to interrupt. Or you might tend to be the kind of person who is more extroverted. And we know that people who are more extroverted are also more likely to interrupt, while introverts tend to not think well in that sort of environment when lots of people are talking and it's kind of overwhelming, and they're especially reluctant to interrupt. So this does not
let me just the traditional brainstorming, you're saying everybody's in a room and everybody can throw out ideas kind of without a system and without, just very spontaneously, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that's exactly what traditional brainstorming looks like. And when we look at traditional brainstorming, again, it has some benefits, like I discussed, but it has a lot of drawbacks. And production blocking is one of these drawbacks. Another one is called evaluation apprehension. That's where you feel worried about sharing an idea that's too out of the box, or maybe implicitly criticizing another member of the team. And when you're worried about criticizing ideas in the brainstorming evaluation stage. So when you're narrowing down the ideas. So first in the brainstorming stage, you're generating ideas. Then the second part of brainstorming is evaluating the quality of those ideas. Many people feel evaluation apprehension. If you haven't felt that, then you might be a high status person. So again, lower status members of the team feel evaluation apprehension. And also people who are more pessimistic tend to feel evaluation apprehension. More optimistic people tend to feel it less. So that's another problem that causes a lot of idea blockage. And finally, social loafing. We see very clearly that when people are generating ideas and when they're part of a group, they tend to generate less ideas per person the more people there are in the group. So the best number of ideas generated per person situation is when there are only 2 people in the group. The more people there are, the lazier our brain gets. And our brain is inherently lazy. That's not criticism of the brain. It's been wired that way to preserve energy, which is understandable. So when you don't need to do the hard work of thinking hard, we tend to kind of free ride on other people in the room. And so that's social loafing. So those are the 3 biggest problems that have been found in traditional brainstorming. And there are a number of techniques that were developed, and this was already discovered in the 70s, 80s, so long before the pandemic. And there were techniques developed already in the early 1990s to address some of these problems using asynchronous methodologies. And I adapted these asynchronous methodologies to the new remote world of work, remote and hybrid teams. And I practiced using it with a number of my clients, and then I published an article in Harvard Business Review about it. So let's talk about what you can do. This methodology called asynchronous virtual brainstorming. So let's talk about the steps. There are 3 big steps here. The first is that all team members generate ideas separately and independently of each other. You cannot do it if you can do it in an office environment, but you will be sitting behind your computer desk, laptop, wherever you are, separately from other people. So in fact, the first tendencies, the first ways this was done, the traditional way this was done in the early 1990s, before I adapted it to this setting, was people sitting in a room with old style computers and generating ideas, and just typing them into the computer. So I'll have the Harvard Business Review article has a lot of citations to that, so you can check it out.
So basically, everybody gets the prompt, and there is not shared discussion at that point.
Exactly.
People get that prompt individually, and on their own, they are doing their own thinking.
Exactly. And that's what they did in the early 1990s. Again, this methodology, and that's similarly what they do right now. So again, very nice and comfortable to do in the comfort of your own home, or if you happen to be going into the office, you can also do it in the office. So separately, independently, and asynchronously. So not at the same time necessarily. You can do it at the same time, but you don't have to. You input them into Google Forms or Mural or another Microsoft Forms. And the key thing is you want to allow anonymity for the input. There are 2 types of anonymity that you can allow. One type of anonymity is one where everyone is absolutely anonymous. You can't know whose idea is coming from whom. That I recommend when you're trying to fix organizational problems, systemic issues, and so on. So when you're talking about working on the business, because there tend to be a number of touchy issues, and you might want to have the opportunity to criticize the leader of your team, their way that they're managing things. But most of the time, what works best is to only have the leader know that you are inputting the information. So the leader, what they would do, if it's Google Forms, for example, you would have a part of the form for your name, and then a part of the form for your idea. And then the leader would know whose idea each idea is, but they would strip away the ideas before they share. They would strip away the names from the ideas before they share the ideas with everyone. So that
Clarifying
is,
question.
yes,
When you
sure,
say the leader may know, that doesn't necessarily need to be the hierarchical leader. It could be the
absolutely. The leader,
facilitator
yes, yeah, the
or
leader
a
I meant,
designated person
yep.
who's keeping track.
That's right. I meant the leader of the session. So
That's
the
great.
facilitator, in other words. Yes. So the leader, meaning the facilitator, whoever is leading the activity. So whoever is facilitating the activity. So I did a bunch of these, and so I have a lot of experience doing that. That is what you really want to do. So you want the facilitator to be able to know, but the other people to not necessarily be able to know. Knowing that the facilitator knows who generate ideas helps provide motivation for each person to generate ideas and to not slack off, which is why I recommend doing it this way. So that is the first step. Now, think about this step. The asynchronicity is great. If you have a geographically distributed teams, and I work with a number of multinationals. So for example, one of my companies that I work with is Applied Materials, a Fortune 200 high-tech manufacturer, which gave me a testimonial, so I'm allowed to talk about my work with them. And so they have teams located in San Francisco and Singapore and a number of other countries. So even before the pandemic, it would have been useful for them to do this. And it's especially useful for them now that most of the people are working remotely and coming into the office rarely. So very useful, asynchronously. So you can do this asynchronously. You can do this over a span of period. If this is like a smallish effort, you can do it over a small period of time. If this is a major thing that you want to work on, I recommend giving it a few days, maybe even a few weeks to input ideas. And so you get that benefit of time. People have a lot of time to think. Now,
when you're prompting them, is it usually one open-ended question, or do you sometimes break it down into 2 or 3 aspects of what you're trying to get at?
It depends on the stage and what the project. So for example, if we're trying to, in the early ideas of a project, and we're just generating a number of ideas about what to do about a project, it's usually going to be one thing. When we are in a later stage of middle or later stage of the project, and there are a number of project streams or number of steps, different ways we can proceed with the project, then it can be a number of more specific prompts.
That's interesting. Thanks for clarifying that.
Now, the asynchronicity is especially helpful for introverts because they have time to think. And that's, again, very helpful for introverts, that asynchronicity, working separately from others, not working on the time pressure and the pressure of other people around them, so they can input their ideas freely without any problems, and for junior and lower status team members. And the anonymity is especially helpful for people who are more pessimistic, so who see the world as more full of threats than opportunities, and also junior and lower status team members.
I wonder also if there is a socially attuned, emotionally attuned leader that holds back their ideas because they don't want the power that their role brings to give undue weight to that idea being pursued. So I like these points, and I think it's not only this, right? And maybe you would affirm that too, that I've seen like the chair of a nonprofit board frequently not want to share ideas, particularly if your meeting setup is like Robert Rules of Order or something, where your role is the facilitator. It just really limits who can add ideas. So what I like about this, it also maybe even separates the meeting leadership when decisions are being made from the roles that people have in those types of meetings. So it really gives leaders a way to participate more freely.
Absolutely. And that's a benefit of having someone else as a facilitator, so the leader doesn't have to facilitate. And also, of course, the leader can share their ideas freely, like you said, Kai, because they are not limited by the idea, well, by the notion that, well, if I share my innovative ideas, then everyone will coalesce around them and we'll just have groupthink, right? Don't want that to happen. Step 2. We talked about step 1. Step 2 is evaluation. So now we have the first step of brainstorming, as folks who do brainstorming may know, is broadening out, going broad. The second step is going narrow. So you want to narrow down the ideas. So you want to evaluate the ideas. So now you take away the names from the ideas. In most cases, you'll want the names for the facilitator to see. Then you take away the names from the spreadsheet or from the mural or whatever you're using. So Google Forms, we're going with that. We're using a spreadsheet. And you give a copy of the spreadsheet with all the ideas on it to every member of the team to anonymously evaluate and comment on it. So you evaluate quantitatively each idea on a scale of 0 to 5 on how innovative, practical, exciting it is. Those are just 3 criteria I typically use, but you might want to customize the criteria to each one. So the first column of a spreadsheet will have all the ideas. The second column will have a column for innovation, 0 to 5, practicality, 0 to 5, how exciting it is, excitingness, 0 to 5. And then each person rates each idea on those criteria. Again, you can have other criteria, other columns. The last column is a notes column, so for comments. So each person can also add their comment. And again, very helpful, prevents evaluation apprehension, very, very useful. So people who are pessimistic, people who are junior can feel free rating the ideas and leaving comments.
So the notes section is where comments are captured.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And do you add up the 3 factors or do you multiply?
Oh, you add up. Yes. The final step, you give it to the facilitator just adds them up pretty quickly, which is easy to do using spreadsheet formula. And then you get the ideas. And then you know how much each idea scored. So, if you have 6 people in a meeting, each idea can have anywhere from 0 to 5 on innovation, 0 to 30 on innovation, 0 to 30 on practicality, and 0 to 30 on excitingness. So the highest score would be 90. And of course, you have some comments as well. And step 3, you have a synchronous meeting. So again, for remote teams, virtual meeting for hybrid teams, I recommend doing this in person. And there, because you can engage with each other more and have better communication, because you can have more signals from each other, if full body language. And there, you already know which ideas are in the top. You see the ideas that are in the 80s, those are ideas, 70s, 80s, those are ideas that are really good. Some ideas are going to be in the 50s, 60s, some ideas are going to be in the 20s and 30s. And I see that's range regularly. And so we see that range, and we know that we really should be focusing on the ideas that are in the 70s, 80s. So we focus on those ideas, and we discuss which of these ideas, and again, keeping in comments in mind, of course, as well, which of these ideas seem like the best ones and most relevant ones to address the problem, the issues that we're dealing with. And of course, we can tweak them a little bit based on the comments and the discussion. And so at the end of this, we usually come up with a list of, it's usually going to be 3 to 5 ideas. I encourage folks to not go beyond 5 ideas. 3 ideas is good. Sometimes, in some cases, you might just want to go with 1, but generally speaking, 3 to 5 ideas that you can implement. And then as part of the meeting, you assign responsibility for the next steps to the people in the room for implementation. And then you discuss how to do things, and then you think about what the measurements are of success, and then you go forward. Now, you're not quite finished because you still have a bunch of ideas, and some of them might be quite good. They might be 60 right now because the situation is not as practical, but they're very exciting and innovative, but it's very impractical because of certain external dynamics. However, it might become practical in 6 months or 12 months. So you decide on a number of ideas that are, hey, these are useful things that we might be thinking about later. You store them in an idea bank for your knowledge management. And so that is great because then you can always come back to it later and say, hey, here are some brilliant ideas we had earlier. We couldn't practically implement it earlier, but now we can. So let's get to it. That is very helpful. And that's, again, something that traditional brainstorming wouldn't give you. All the other ideas are lost. So the consequence of this, we have a lot of very clear research showing that this sort of methodology, this sort of approach gives you both more ideas and more innovative ideas as rated by external third-party evaluators compared to traditional brainstorming. So you
I
get
love
both
that.
more ideas. Yeah.
And it's prioritized, and I really like this. I have a clarifying question
Sure.
between step 1 and step 2. So
Yep.
step 1, everybody has their independent, Google Forms, and they're inputting their individual ideas. I assume that between step 1 and step 2, the facilitator or somebody is curating those.
Yeah, so you're looking at that's part of the facilitator's job, right? So if you're looking, you got from everyone, you get a list of ideas. So you all submit them into a Google form. And so let's say in a list, if it's a 6-people team, you might get something like 50 ideas. So 50 ideas, some of them might be duplicative. So you want to remove the duplicative ideas or combine them in some way. But that's going to be a pretty quick work. That's like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So that can be done pretty quickly. And then you send out the anonymized sheet of ideas to everyone to rate.
And in that stage, if somebody submits an idea that's ambiguous or unclear, or would the facilitator's role be clarifying that?
It depends on how much the facilitator knows about the idea. In general, I'd rather leave that idea there and discuss it in the synchronous meeting, or have people comment on it saying that, well, this idea is not as clear as it could be, but if this idea was rephrased this way, I think it would be very exciting, or something like that.
Yeah, that's the exact process that I'm honing in on, because I feel like the ideas can be reshaped with just a clarifying question or a paraphrase, or a person rethinking about it again, and just all of a sudden you level up. And you're saying that there would be opportunity in the synchronous meeting.
That's right.
To even reshape the ideas that are on that list and that had been scored. Interesting.
Yeah, I mentioned about the tweaking the ideas. That's what I meant. So when you have the ideas and you see, okay, this is an idea that had 75, great. But let's look at the comments. Some of the comments say, oh, this is a great idea, but here's how it can be improved. And with this improved version, it probably would have been an 85 or something like that. Yeah. So that's the discussion about the ideas, right? Another thing you can do is, if you have a more complex project, now that you have a list of ideas, you can redo this exercise, do step 1 and 2 again, and see if you come up with new ideas. So that's something that you would do I do it when I do a strategic direction for the board of directors of a company or a nonprofit. I do this second step. So a second series of virtually synchronous brainstorming. So once we have a first set of ideas, we do step 1 and step 2. We don't go to the synchronous meeting. We just say, okay, now you've seen each other's ideas. Now you've evaluated them. Are there any fresh ideas? Are there any new ideas? Are there any rephrased ideas that you want to put in? And so we go through step 1 and 2 again. And that's for really big things and for more ambiguous, complex things.
Yeah, could you share a little bit more if somebody's watching this and says, oh man, are we supposed to do this for every little decision that we're making, or everything that the team is facing? Or, how do you make a determination of when to invest, this level of commitment to a process like this?
Sure. This process, in the shortest form of it, this process takes, let's see. So the first part of it, in the shortest form of it, would take maybe half hour. And the meeting would take from 30 to 45 minutes in any shorter form of it. So to any decision to which you want to invest maybe 90 minutes in making it, then that's a good opportunity to use this. So if you wouldn't invest 90 minutes of your team's time into making the decision or solving the problem, doing the innovation, then you shouldn't invest into this process.
I like that thinking. I could imagine, a meeting happening before lunch that kicks this off, the facilitator fielding the input maybe over lunch, and then right after lunch, it's ready to be scored. And then if you have your spreadsheet set up, you could almost, while everybody's on that same meeting, start seeing it ranked, seeing the ranked ideas, and just having a really dynamic conversation that way.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Another is just to do it before you come to work and then have a morning meeting. And you don't need to take everybody's time you just know that people know the process. Then you just submit your ideas overnight. And then you have a morning meeting where you have the synchronous meeting. So that's also a way to do it.
That's great. I like it a lot. We're talking a lot in this series about what are our norms, as you were saying. What are the procedures? What are our routines? And COVID just taking all these things that we had for granted as figured out, and we know how we do it, and just confronting us with needing to rethink simple things like how we share ideas. But as you said, it's not that our processes in person were optimal either.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying here is there may be new opportunities in our hybrid and remote working environments, maybe particularly with people's familiarity with just the technology of working together online and communicating online to enhance brainstorming, for example. But you also acknowledge that there's still a reason, with meeting in person, where if that's possible, that yes, don't forget that this isn't a black and white extremist scenario where we have to do everything online or in person. If your physical constraints require you to be remote, of course, that's one thing, but don't forget the opportunity to be in person. But being in person isn't the right thing at all moments in the process, in decision-making processes, in creativity processes, in certain types of conversations.
That's exactly right, Kai. I mean, and we see with this methodology, step 1 and step 2 are done remotely. Or you can also be in the office, but you would do them separately in your own cubicle, separate from other people. So why not do them in the comfort of your own home and skip the commute, right? That's great. So you do the step 1 and 2 remotely, and step 3, if you can, come into the office. I recommend doing that. So that's a nice hybrid methodology. And if you're all remote, it works great all remote as well.
I've used the open space meeting method frequently, which is a method where you don't have an agenda and everybody can work together to create an agenda. And we've done it with, 300 people in a room, and they create an agenda for a day or two. And when I consult with local governments, for example, one of their worries is, wait a second, what if somebody puts up an idea that I don't want, or that I don't want to be associated with, or I don't want to set expectations that we're actually going to commit to this idea? What would you say to a leader or anybody else, even an operational leader that has some worry about what kind of crazy ideas could be put out here, and maybe we don't want ideas in this area, or people that really are from a maybe informed place, but also maybe a fearful place, not wanting to open up brainstorming in this way?
So I would say 2 things. So one is to consider whether someone sharing an idea and other people evaluating it highly might challenge your perspective on this, and it might be beneficial to challenge your perspective. So that's one perspective, one approach, right? So you want to maybe be somewhat humble about your confidence in certain ideas not wanting to be shared. That's one approach. A second approach, if you have reasons, so if this has to do with some internal company dynamics, processes, systems, politics, you might not want certain things to be said publicly. In that case, you want the facilitator to let you look at the ideas and allow you to take some out before the list is shared broadly. And the great thing about this is that in the traditional brainstorming, you wouldn't be able to do that. It would just be, every person spouting their mouth off, right?
Right. So Fire Joe isn't going to immediately be on the decision-making list. Yeah,
exactly.
This theme, and I've done a number of the interviews in this series now, of course, and I have the benefit of that. And what I'm finding is, interview after interview, this humility piece, as you just put it, is a central theme, and leaders just being open and feeling okay about not having all the answers. And from that place of vulnerability, from facilitation, from trust in their colleagues, implementing processes in an iterative way, in a way to be adaptive and agile as you go through it. Even as you're describing this process, you haven't, you know, you didn't say at the end, we all vote on what exactly the idea is, and we need to commit to that idea no matter what for the next 2 years. You're saying this is a way to really facilitate creativity, bring everybody's best ideas to the table for the purposes of informing a conversation about team direction, organizational priorities, how we work together, what would be needed to take advantage of a certain opportunity, those sorts of things. That's a real theme here, is that, you know, leaders don't need to have all the answers, but they are responsible and have a unique opportunity to shape the processes with which their teams and organizations are communicating and brainstorming and making decisions together.
I'm glad that my work aligns with the work of others. That's usually a good thing.
Yeah, no,
yes,
this is a great practical
a
tool here, and I'll definitely be using it. What else would you like to say about it before we move on to your shameless plug and listener thank you gift?
Well, just to add about the leaders, the nice thing about this that you talked about, leader humility, is that what I find is that often the ideas that rise to the top, based on my experience, are ideas that surprise leaders. They would not think that these are the ideas that would be rated most highly and seen as most valuable. But once there's a discussion and you see that the ideas, sometimes the ideas that come up to the top are ideas that are shared by junior team members, lower status team members, people who are more introverted, people who are more pessimistic, who don't get nearly as much voice in traditional meetings, in traditional brainstorming, in traditional activities. So those pessimists, those introverts, those junior, lower status team members really have a lot of creativity that's unlocked by this methodology. And leaders are genuinely surprised to see participants who they didn't really think were as creative and as much of a contributor, potential contributor, as they could have been, really flower because of this process.
Such an important part. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Let me unpack that a little bit. One, implicitly in what I'm hearing here is that not only should only the leader not be responsible for ideas, that can extend to the leadership team. And the idea that the C-suite itself, or the dean's council, or whatever your leadership team is called, ought to be the only ones involved in the decision-making processes is also not aligned with what you were just saying in terms of opening up this brainstorming to all levels of the organization. It makes me think a lot about L.E.A.D.'s complexity leadership theory, where she's saying there are entrepreneurial leaders that are kind of typical people with the new ideas, but you also have operational leaders that are responsible for the organization and the systems, and you need their voices. Frequently, I know in our office, the people that know how the systems work are not on the leadership team. You know, our software, the rubber meets road, how would this be implemented, are not people normally in the higher leadership. So what is your experience in how to, and then I should say, complexity leadership theory has a third leader role called the enabling leader. And the enabling leadership is there to allow the new ideas to be discussed with operational leaders, but in a way that those natural tensions can be constructive and not destructive. I really love that theory for these reasons. And what would you say to leaders that aren't used to involving all levels of the organization into certain types of brainstorming?
I think the most valuable thing that these leaders can think about is how information travels to them. So the information that travels to leaders tends to suffer from a cognitive bias called shoot the messenger effect. And that's kind of like it sounds, where negative information that goes up to the leadership team tends to be suppressed, positive information is enhanced, and risk is reduced. And risk accompanies every new idea. The more innovative an idea is, the more risky it tends to be. So if you want to be just an incremental leader who doesn't want to rock the boat and change things around, you should just do what you traditionally did. But you know what? The world around you is not incremental. The world around you is transformative. So you're probably not going to be able to survive successfully in the medium and long term if you're just going to be an incremental leader and if you're going to be listening to the least risky ideas. That's why it's important to increase the innovation and therefore the risk of the ideas that are coming to you. And again, you can choose which ideas to implement. In a synchronous meeting, a leader can influence the implementation of the ideas, but it's very valuable to actually see which ideas were rated most highly and what kind of comments were actually given to the ideas. So people can actually comment, they can share their thoughts, they can express their feelings, and then you can know, and then you can make the decision. So this is a way of getting information from the very bottom of the organization, depending on who you involve, right? I definitely recommend involving people with expertise on the topic in the process. The leader is not the one who is an expert on working with customers, right? The leader is not the one who is an expert in working with vendors, whatever questions you're doing. The leader is not the one who's an expert on working with rank and file employees. If you want to deal with some HR issues and you're talking about this as a way of employee engagement, right? The leaders aren't working on that level with employees every day. So you want to get information from the people who are actually dealing directly with the issue. They have ground level expert knowledge. You're not the expert as a leader. They are the experts on whatever their narrow area of rank and file activity is. You want to get their information and you want to increase the risk of ideas, and then you could make the decision on which ones to implement. Of course, you shape that in the synchronous meeting as the leader and the decision maker.
This is great. It's practical, it's informed, and I think it's hopefully something that if you just heard about it today, you can try it out and you know, give it a try. So I will model now the shameless plug on my part, and then give you a chance to give your shameless plug and offer your listener thank you gift. The shameless plug from me as part of the JMU School of Professional and Continuing Education is 2 leadership training opportunities. One is with Maureen Metcalf of the Innovative Leadership Institute. We are creating a 5-month training. The deadline for registering is in October. That starts November 1st, 2022. Follow the link in the description here. And that is a program to really develop yourself and your own awareness around what it means to be innovative. Be continually working on your own self as a leader. That's what that program is about. The second training that I'll promote is more aligned with what we're doing here today in terms of tactics. We have a new project management basics and team communication course where we go through how to use a RACI chart and a flow chart and a basic project management tools, visual aids, the 5 whys of Lean Six Sigma. And we do that in an online training environment. And it's a great thing to do if you're looking for tactical tools like this, how to facilitate conversations with your team members, whether you're in person, all remote, or hybrid. So look for that link below as well. Now, off to your shameless plug and listener thank you gift.
Sure. So as you listeners already know, you can get 3 additional resources, namely my book, a best-selling book on leading hybrid and remote teams at tinyurl.com/DAE event. Again, tinyurl.com/DAE event. I look forward to learning what you would like to get from that, and hopefully we'll connect in the future.
And what kind of consulting services do you provide? If anybody's looking for that sort of thing, how should they reach out to you?
They can go to my website, which is disasteravoidanceexperts.com. So disasteravoidanceexperts.com. As I mentioned, I helped 21 organizations, mostly private companies, a couple of nonprofits and government organizations, transition to figuring out their future of work. The large majority chose a hybrid first model, 2 chose a remote first model, but the large majority have helped with a hybrid first model. And this technique of how to do virtually synchronous brainstorming for hybrid remote teams is one of many techniques that are specifically adapted to hybrid and remote settings. And that's what I helped companies develop, figure out how to address a number of challenges around the return to the office, complex issues there. Happy to discuss this with anyone. Go to disasteravoidanceexperts.com and there will be a contact us form and you can fill that out, or you can directly email me. My email is gleb, G-L-E-B, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. Again, Gleb, G-L-E-B, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com.
Well, I can't thank you enough to add this practical insight and really experienced perspective into this speaker series. I'm so thrilled that you accepted the invitation, and I do hope people take advantage of your opportunity to read the book and even contact you if they see value in that. With that, make sure that if you enjoyed this, that you sign up. In the comments, there's a link to sign up for the entire speaker series, and you'll get them all in your inbox so you don't miss any. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Dr. Gleb.
Thank you for inviting me, Kai.